Thanks, Maxine, and thanks for the opportunity to come and talk to you all. Can you all hear me up there? Yeah. Okay, so my name's, as Maxine said, is Adam Kerslake. I work at Unions New South Wales, and my job is to run campaigns. That's what I do. I do it professionally. I've been doing it for about 20 years, but more intensely working across the union movement in the last 10 years. And so I've been asked to come and talk about campaigns generally. The specifics of your challenge you're going to have to get into, but I want to talk to you more broadly about the challenges that we face as working people and what are some collective responses that people are taking, which hopefully will be useful information for what you do. Because there are some very clear lessons and there are some very clear do's and don'ts as you're trying to face the challenges that you face. So, yeah, that's what and I want to talk to you. I know a number of you from the arts community, but some of you aren't. Is that right? I'm a bit confused about who's here. Most of you from the arts community? Yeah. Well, if I can speak to you as people from the arts community, because this is really kind of right up your alley, to be frank. My mum's a painter, my brother's an architect, my sister's an interior designer, and I design campaigns. It's creative thinking that actually wins these battles. But you've also got to have momentum and a kind of capacity to build your campaign on the ground as well. So it's sort of two components that I want to talk about. But just some context. What's happening most directly in English-speaking countries, but it's happening elsewhere as well. It's most directly happening in English-speaking countries, is there's a contest of ideas. And most of us, working people, are kind of losing that battle. So what you're experiencing is part of a much bigger thing. In the English-speaking world, there's this view that the government should retreat from providing basic services and infrastructure. Taxes should be reduced, particularly for corporations and for rich people, and that government should put more responsibility onto individuals to take responsibility for their own situation, whether it's skills, whether it's health, whether it's other parts of the education, whether it's transport, whether it's housing, whatever it is, there's a move of pushing stuff that the government used to do onto us as citizens. This broad ideological thing that we're dealing with has been incorporated into our language. And I'll give you some examples of what you're up against when you're trying to battle this publicly. We don't talk about taxes as the great things that provide our public infrastructure. We tend to talk about taxes as being burdens. You get a tax break. We seek tax relief. Well, every time you have that happen, that takes money out of the government and goes off to someone for tax relief, and that prevents the government from being able to provide those services. So the colonisation of language has been a big part of the ideological battle that we're actually dealing with here. So when you're fighting your campaign and Barry O'Farrell's on the radio saying, well, TAFE has to compete just like everybody else. If a private provider can offer the same service and they can do it cheaper, this is what he says, we are morally bound to consider that private operator. Now that puts you in a terrible situation because TAFE has a big infrastructure. It provides all sorts of things for all sorts of people in all sorts of situations. And then you've got these private providers who have none of that infrastructure, none of the dealing with people with disability and learning disabilities and so on, and yet you've got to compete in that marketplace for your future. You can't win that. You can't win that battle. And that is a seductive battle if you think there's no role for government in providing education. See what I mean by this ideological battle that you're actually dealing with here? This is actually much bigger than your actual struggle. So that's why I've been asked to talk to you about it, because I deal with all the unions. I deal with the transport unions. I deal with the electricity unions. I deal with all those unions, and they're all facing the same thing. What we have to do is engage in a discussion about what the government should be doing and why it adds value to the broader community. Now, I think you are so well placed to prosecute this argument. I think anybody who says in our economy now that we need less capacity to train people in the general arts world absolutely crazy, absolutely crazy. We are in a knowledge economy. Look at Sydney. The main jobs in Sydney that are making, the higher income jobs are all happening through the process of creative thinking. We're adding value by thinking about things in new ways, creating new ways of putting things together, whether it's online. I know people in TAFE often tell me there's a difference between digital and non-digital training. I accept that. But the artistic process of creating something, you've got a phone full of apps. All of those images were created by somebody thinking of a design that then goes onto something which is electronic that then moves forward. That process of thinking of that design, I can tell you in my job, that's what I do. I spend a lot of my time thinking about the imagery which is going to cut through that broad public discourse and grab people's attention. Okay, so one of the things we've done, we did this back about 3 years ago, was we started to talk about how do you talk about the role of government? What's the role of government in a modern society? Why should the government provide these broad things? So we started a background campaign, and that was called Better Services for a Better State. Better State. Your TAFE campaign is based on that, actually, the one that's been running for a while. It's called Invest in TAFE for a Better State. It's the same sort of imagery. But just going back and putting together public sector workers and saying that if we have strong public infrastructure, we actually have a really great place to live. Actually makes a huge difference. So connecting public infrastructure to quality of life, okay? That's what we've been doing for several years now to counter the narrative that government's inefficient, taxes are a burden, they need to be removed, we need to be competitive and blah-de-blah. As opposed to the Europeans, particularly the French. Sarkozy, the former president of France, announced they were going to increase the retirement age by 3 years. You know what the French did? They went crazy. They're on the streets, they put the cars on their side, they set them on fire. They are absolutely ballistic. The government's withdrawing a little bit from providing something, the people go crazy. Here, we're all isolated. We're all feeling like, do we really deserve it? Should we be providing this? So we get defensive because it doesn't seem like what we're doing really matters, and if it's not there anymore, is it important? Well, I want to say to you that means that puts us in a bigger frame. We've got to start saying the quality of our services are defining of the quality of our community, and that in turn defines the quality of life that we will have going forward into the future. If we don't have strong arts training at TAFE, we will not produce a generation of people that are skilled in those areas, and that will affect our economy, but it will also affect a whole host of things that go into our cultural dimensions as well. So I say to you, that's where I think you've got to think about this. What is the thing that the community gets out of having, TAFE providing art courses, and how do we translate that? Let's not get into the battle of cost effective, not cost effective. Let's talk about community, quality services, and the value adding to community. The second thing I think that you want to think about is this. How do you build a broad-based set of alliances around this challenge that you face? If you go it alone, I'll be frank with you, you'll lose. Almost every union that is going it alone, they're really struggling because their argument is like a cacophony of noise of arguments. But once you get together with others, so what we've been doing is my latest project, which is nearly killing me, is setting up local groups. So we're going to set up 35, 37 now, local groups across the state. Everywhere we have local groups. And who are those local groups? They are teachers, they are nurses, they are cops, they are firefighters, they are local private sector workers, and they're coming together. And in the first of these things, has anybody been to one of these? There was one at Bankstown last night, was there? A few of you have been to them, okay? So you know what goes on. So the idea is people tell their story. And it all sounds, when you go there as somebody, your story is your story, right? But you get up there and tell your story, you hear from a nurse, you go into some of our hospitals, the nurses are practically in tears because there's not enough staff. And they're not replacing people. They're trying to casualise the nursing staff. If you're working as a non-nurse person or a doctor person in a hospital, your job's probably going to be outsourced and casualised because they can do catering, they can do cleaning, they can bring someone else in to do it. So you're feeling insecure, you're feeling frightened, you're feeling whatever. Oh, I've got to go. I've got 1 minute. There you go. So Anyway, so what I want to do is encourage you to think about how you engage publicly with this in a way that speaks to the community about the value of what you do, because you are so valuable. 2, the value of the TAFE icon is something that value adds to our broader community. And 3, get in with other people, particularly with these local groups, and start talking about the quality of services that you provide to your community and how you're going to value add from there. Don't try to fight this on your own. That's my thing. Do you want me to take questions, Maxine, or will I just be... Okay, so we've been involved in it at the request of the Teachers Fed. Okay, so the Teachers Fed comes and says, you know, what do you want to do? And I think what we've done is we've been basically supporting whatever the Teachers Federation is actually saying and bringing it to the attention of other unions. So what we would do is we would make it a bigger issue across the union movement. We'd also make it a bigger issue by seeking meetings with ministers or whatever if there were other unions involved. That's how we value add. We don't value add by doing what the Teachers Federation does really well, because that's what the Teachers Federation does. But what we do is we provide you with a larger network of opportunity to be able to prosecute your case. That's our role. Yeah, look, it's a really, really good point, because I have talked in a really abstract sense. What we'll do is we'll work with the Teachers Fed to actually help you concretise your actual bit of a campaign. But yeah, I can work with you. It is quite a lot of my time is spent drilling down, getting ideas that cut through. How do you redirect something in a way that actually appeals to people? I've got to say that what I've heard so far in what you guys have been talking about on the radio is cutting through. I actually think you're doing a really good job. And I guess probably just to reinforce it, I don't want to make it more complicated than what it is, but what you're saying about the value that you add to our community, I heard it on the radio the other day and I thought that's just really brilliant, because the moment you get caught up in an argument about economics is the moment we lose. It's that's Barry O'Farrell. This is a question about priorities. We either value and put money into this area or we don't. If we don't, what does that mean for our community? If we take money out of the arts, if we take money out of music, if we take money out of all those areas, what does that mean for the kind of society that we have going forward? And that, I think people will stop and listen to that. They'll go, actually, there's a point there. But at the moment, what they'll try and turn you into is a bunch of arty-farty, irrelevance, and they need to move you on because you're not competitive with some, two-bob private provider. Once they get on, if they can get you into that turf, because battles of contests of ideas are always fought around frames. If they get you on that frame, that's how they'll try and shove you out the door. If it's on the other way, actually TAFE's iconic. We all went to TAFE. It was really good. I left school early, and now I've got an equivalent of my HSC, and now I'm an arts teacher in a school, and I wouldn't have got there. That conversation. We then talk about the quality of why art is important to take people from one level to another, why it matters in a knowledge economy, all that stuff. I just really think once you get into that space, you start to win the debate. In addition to our local meetings, which are that's good for building leverage, particularly around, talk about go and see a politician. Well, if you go see a politician on that's one thing, but if you turn up with nurses, cops, ambos, fireys, and you say we don't like this, you've all of a sudden got a community people. But we also have Unions New South Wales meetings, which is all the unions. We have 67 affiliates every Thursday night. Plus those, well, you would do it through Maxine and your organisers here. So the Teachers Federation has a delegation that goes. We would get you to come along. If you were to come to talk about what you do and to do a broader appeal, we could help assist you get media shots and whatever. But this needs to be sort of mapped out with the Teachers Fed to make all this happen. But I guess the point to know is you're plugging into something bigger. That's the point. You're not having to start flat-footed here. This is an ideological assault that's happening to us, but we've got an ideological assault that's happening back. We are not going down without a fight. We are going to fight. And we're going to fight with you for what you're trying to achieve as well. That's what I think you need to take away from what I'm saying. I'm not going into the specifics of your campaign, but you're part of something that's a much bigger struggle. And the depth of thinking that's gone into this has taken many years because, the business community has been many years demonising us. They've been trying to attack us, and the way you're being treated at the moment, what Maxine was talking about before, the way the staff are being treated is absolutely disgusting. But I've got to say to you, it's happening in almost every corner of the state public sector. And I think once, if Abbott gets in, you can expect it in the federal public sector as well.